Previously on the Pavement Top 50.
Song number 11 on the countdown is the second track from the debut long play. It's Trigger Cut, Wounded Kite at 17. Martel, what are your initial thoughts of this song being number 11?
Well, it's a great track. It's one that I've, has been in my life for a long time. I actually bought the single, which I'm holding up here.
Cool.
Yeah, bought that back in the 90s. I was listening to it in preparation for meeting with you, JD, and I've never really thought too much about the lyrics, so I tried to give that a bit more thought. I love the tune. I loved it on tour, on this recent tour. I thought they did a brilliant job of the track for that.
Hey, this is Westy from the rock and roll band Pavement, and you're listening to The Countdown.
Hey, it's JD here, back for another episode of our Top 50 Countdown for seminal indie rock band Pavement. Week over week, we're going to count down the 50 essential Pavement tracks that you selected with your very own top 20 ballots. I then tabulated the results using an abacus and 3 bears. One that couldn't count, one that counted too quickly, and one that was just right. I named him Julio. I love Julio. How will your favorite song fare in the rankings? You'll need to tune in to find out. So there's that. This week I'm joined by Pavement superfan Jen Jones, aka Jen Echo. Thank you, Jen, for your time today. How are you doing, motherfucker?
I'm doing great. Excited for this opportunity.
Oh, I'm excited too. This is going to be fun. Let's get right into it then.
Let's do this.
Tell me about your Pavement origin story.
Well, I've heard people talk about like the first time they heard it and things like that, and I couldn't tell you that. I know I had gotten Demolition Plot and Perfect Sound as it came out. I was started working in an independent record store in a college town when I was 16 years old, so that was 1989. And my high school sweetheart just seemed to know. I don't know how he knew. Well, he had cable TV too, so that helped. But he always knew what on the first mixtape he ever made me in 1988, it had Teenage Riot on it, which had just come out. It had Pixie Surfer Rosa, which nobody would really. I hadn't heard of that in 1988. Like, it just blew my mind. Had Freak Fiend on it, like it was just crazy. So he definitely was my big influence. So I'm positive that like he was the one who was like, you got to check this out. But then right after high school, the Summer Babe single came out a few months before Slanted and Enchanted had come out, and that sounded so different. Like they finally were cohesive instead of just kind of fun. On that, and I don't know if you have a original 7-inch, they engraved, I don't know what the inside groove before the label is called, but they engraved on side A, why penetration, and on side B, why not envelopment. And that just added to the whole mystery. Like, in the I don't even think there was an insert in Perfect Sound. I don't have one anymore, but I have it, but I don't know. There's not an insert, but I still have the insert for.
No, there's no insert.
Yeah, but there's an insert in Demolition Plot, so it makes this thing about Kelly was in charge of played the Chevrolet and kept Gary in line, and their names were SM and Spiral Stairs, and like there was no pictures to be found. This is even before there was internet that at least mere mortals could get, and so it was just a mystery, right? So now if you flash forward to 92, I had broken my high school sweetheart's heart before the end of high school. I broke up with him because he was going off to college and I was not going there too. And so he was, not my biggest fan anymore. But we had
Oh no.
we had a squad in high school, and we saw so many great shows and had so many great adventures as kids that really liked indie rock. And me being, and Andy worked in another record store, so we just had a lot of inside connections, just even as 16-year-olds. And so we saw a lot of shows together. And so when my high school music posse said they were heading down to Columbus because Andy went to school near Columbus, to see Pavement, I was like, I'm coming along. And they're like, well, it's kind of Andy's thing. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'm not going to miss Pavement. That's the closest they're coming. So day of the show, we all gather at Andy's house, and we get in the car, and there's me, my friend, Andy, and then our friends from high school, Ian and Chris. And Andy tells us we have to pick up his college friend on the way. And so we're driving down, and it's pretty tense in the car. And that was pretty much always the case. It was me and a bunch of dudes heading down somewhere to see a great band. And we drive up to this cemetery, and like, whether or not it's true, I think in the spirit of all kind of like Pavement stories in the beginning, like how they, drove mules for wheels and whatever kind of things, they made up stories. Like, I swear Nick jumped up out of a grave. He had a summer job digging graves at a cemetery, and like, he was dirty.
Oh my God.
And he just jumps in the car, and we still have a ways to go. Like, I think Columbus is like maybe 2.5 hours. So this was just like in Toledo, which is only like 45 minutes away. Anyway, so now there's 4 dudes in the car. And what I remember about that was they were, this is what dudes did in the early 90s in car rides, is they tried to stump each other with Star Wars trivia, which, if it doesn't involve Princess Leia or Yoda, like, I don't have anything to add to that. Yeah, I saw them when I was 5, for fuck's sake, but not, So, I'm just rolling my eyes in the back, and everybody's pretending I'm not there, or at least Andy is. And we get to Columbus, and we think the first thing we should do is just at least figure out where the club is, right? Because we're all, 19 years old. So, it needs to be an 18 and over show for us to get in a place that we can't like smooth talk our way into. And it's at this bar called Stashes. And we find Stashes, and we just peek inside, and the day drinkers there look like a very rough crowd, in the sense they look like really hard living blue collar workers that are day drinking. So we go and we walk around the town, and we get something to eat. And I remember the other weird thing about that day was we go to get something to eat, and there's like this place that's like, I think like a KFC, Taco Bell, and like a Pizza Hut, and you just go to one window and you can order anything from any one of those places, and you go to another window and pick it up. And
sounds so magical.
I know, it's just like so weird. So it's something for everybody, right? If you want a pizza, Mexican, or chicken, right? But there's a record store called Used Kids, and we just spent the day kind of doing all that stuff. And when we so after lunch, we noticed that there was a van outside the club, and we were like, that's got to be Pavement's van, because it was a white van that was decorated in black Sharpie, and they just like written on it like they write on all their singles and everything else, just decorated it, right? And we see them unloading. And so this is the first any of us have ever seen any member of Pavement. And honestly, they're only a few years older than us, like maybe 5 or 6. But like they're just young dudes. And so, we kind of chat them up, and we're really excited about the show. And so we get in there pretty early, because we want to make sure we get a good spot. We have our ideas of where's a good spot to stand and things like that. And this is a really small venue with a low ceiling. It's a bar, really. And so by the time the doors open, I know Scott was working the merch stand, and I think maybe Bob was there working the merch stand, but that part is like vivid to me. But I know I was talking to Scott at the show, at the merch stand, saying how I was really excited for this show and how I had everything on vinyl. And he said, "Do you have Slay tracks?" And I was like, "Well, everything but Slay tracks on vinyl." And he's like, "But don't worry, we're gonna put out this thing, And I think he told me it was Westing, or maybe they didn't have a name yet. But he's like, "It's gonna be all of our singles, because we're just trying to do something for Jag City." Now that we're on Matador and clearly gonna, blowing up, like give Drag
Right.
City
Yeah.
one more thing. And so he's like, you'll be able to have those songs at least on vinyl when that comes out. And I was like, just all excited, about this whole prospect. So the opening band was called the Toiling Midgets, and I can't even really tell you about it except that what we thought was one of those day drinking, hard living locals was acting the fool. He was hanging from the rafters. He was doing handstands. He was just annoying all the people that were excited to see Pavement for the first time, and just really annoying the crowd. So um, as we were waiting for Pavement, he was keeping up his antics and stuff like that. And the guys come out, less Gary, and say, "Hey, has anybody seen our drummer?" So that salty old dude starts trying to go up to the front, and the bros just started taking him down, like like thought he was like, "Sit down, like you're not gonna get up there." And Malkmus goes, "No, that's our drummer." And so they let Gary get up there and they play this show. And I don't know that I started right in front of Malkmus, but I got my way up to right in front of Malkmus for the whole show. And all show, I thought like I was getting hit with his sweat. Like, I mean, I'm just like, but I don't mind. It was just, it was a great time to see him because every song you wanted to hear was just Slanted and Enchanted and everything before it. So there was just nothing that was like, you were like, And so after the show, like I was on the Malkmus side of this. It wasn't even a very big stage, and there's pictures. This guy named Jay Fotoman, Fotoman. He took tons of concert photos in that club and around Columbus at that time, and he has pictures from that Pavement show. Although none of us are in them, but still, it's just great to see those pictures. And I find my squad because they're my ride home, and it's just all four boys are just standing there, like, because they were their own roadies at that point, so they're having to break down their shit and take it back out to that markered up van. And and all the boys are like, oh, what should we ask about? Should we ask about tuning? Should we ask about pedal effects? Should we ask about whatever it was? They were trying to figure out if they had chance to ask one question, what were they going to ask?
What would it be? Right? Yeah.
And I get a tap on my shoulder, and I'm sure it's going to be somebody saying like, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And I turn around, and it's Malkmus. I'm 19 years old. And he goes, and he's kind of like shy-ish, and he's like, hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for spitting on you all show. And I was like, oh, that was spit. He's like,
oh, man.
I get kind of, I get a lot of saliva in my mouth. And I'm like, oh, I didn't mind. I thought it was sweat. I wouldn't have been any better. And then, the four boys that I was with saw that as their opportunity to be like, what about the tuning? And what about the pedals? And blah, 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 blah. But, I was spitting. He noticed me and he spit on me all night, right? So that was 92, and anxiously awaited Cricket Rain to come out. And I started at the record store in 89, and I had a hiatus 93 to 94. And that's just a dark time that we don't talk about. But at that time, I was working at Urban Outfitters, and I met my friend Jess. Now, Jess and I went to high school together, but I didn't really know her. I had my own squad, and we did our own thing, and she had hers. But we ended up at Urban Outfitters at the same time working. And she had just gotten back from living a year in Athens, and we just started talking about bands we had seen, and both of us had seen Pavement. So when we heard they were coming, we got tickets to a show in Chicago, and we got tickets to a show in Detroit. And I'm going to let her tell those stories because I swear meeting bands is in her DNA. Her mom was a Grand Funk Railroad groupie, and she can tell you all about that kind of thing. But she just had all kinds of great ideas on how to get noticed by a band, but for the purpose of becoming friends with them. So we went prepared. We had prepared all summer to be able to or however, I don't remember what time of year it was, but we prepared for months to make sure that they noticed us in Chicago, but make sure we met them in Detroit, like on our home turf, because we assumed that like, Chicago at that time had like Urge Overkill, Liz Fair, and I don't know if Jesus was there or not, but like they just had a lot of bands, and we just figured like backstage at that show was going to be all kinds of celebrities, and we wouldn't be noticed. But in Detroit, we didn't, think that we'd have that kind of competition. So we thought, just make sure we're on their radar in Chicago and we'll make our splash in Detroit. And we did. And like I said, I'm not going to tell you all those stories
So
because
cool.
he was the mastermind of that. And I don't think any of this would have happened without her amazing talents and ability to think about how to interact, because it never would have occurred to me. I mean, it was a big no duh after the fact, but at the time I was like, that's brilliant. I've never thought of that. And I'd been seeing and meeting bands like through the proper channels for, years at that point. But I'll pick it up.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you want to go back and listen to Jessica's episode, that is song number 20. So you can go back and listen to that, and then come back to this episode, and Jen will pick up where
there you
she's
go.
left
Yeah.
off. Yeah.
There'll be a couple places where we'll fill in each other's gaps.
Sure.
But for Cricket Rain, there was pre-video and post-video. So they started, at least they were through Detroit for the first leg of Cricket Rain, and it was pretty specifically Cricket Rain and things before. Slanted, Enchanted, and before Westing ever came out, Watery Domestic came out, and that was like a totally different sound. That was really exciting. Those 4 songs were like, is this going to be the whole album? Like, we were excited. And then their first Peel sessions it sounded like they were songs made at the same time that Watery was made. I mean, they all.
How did you get access? How did you get access to the Peel stuff? Do you remember?
Well, they made 7 inches of them.
Oh, wow.
So this is the first Peel session. And what I like about this one, I'll bring it up to this one had some like fun facts on the back.
Oh, cool.
So it says Scott's first record was Joy to the World by Three Dog Night, and Gary's first record bought was Purple People Eater by Alley Oop. The dumbest thing Mark ever done was spilt water in the face of a member of Nation of Ulysses. I thought he was someone else. N of U is one of my favorite bands, and it was a bummer. I apologize profusely. That's what Mark said the dumbest thing he'd ever done back in 1992 was. The dumbest thing ever done by Malkmus, he says, he left Disneyland by himself. His parents had to hop off the Small World ride to look for him.
Oh my God.
This one, Robert says, earliest memory was peeing off the high dive at the local swimming pool at the age of 4. So we got some fun facts on the...
Who published those?
Oh, who knows? They were bootlegs.
Right,
like,
okay.
This one actually says,
Yeah.
This one, which is the one that has... Oh, this was a good one because this one actually had the Sutcliffe catering song on it, which became Easily Fooled. So this one... is the one that has Brink in the Clouds, Orange Black, Tartar Martyr, random title, but it says +7 and +5 songs. And so it says Peel Session February 94. And this one actually does say that this is Scott's label, Treble Kicker and Cold Drive.
Oh, cool.
His parents'
Cool,
house.
cool.
This one, let's see if it says anything on it. UK JP sessions made in the USA is all it says. So they were bootlegs as far as I know. And then this one was, this is the 92 one. And again, I just think they were bootlegs, but because I worked in a record store and, I would just tell the buyer to get anything Pavement and I would pick it up. So,
Right.
This one also doesn't say. This one says Good Times GT01. So Good Times label is the 92 Peel session. But yeah, so that's how I had those. And man, we put these on tapes right away, and these became like especially like 17 Well, I think that's a just memory, but like, doing the see myself come running back, and then she'd go running back, and then I'd say running back, and we just have great sing-alongs in our on our many, because everything was about between 2 hours and 5 hours from Ann Arbor to catch other shows. So we had a lot of driving to do between shows. So a lot of
Yeah.
singing in the car type things. But so in the time between May, they came back through in October. And that was after, I believe, well, for sure after Cut Your Hair's video hit MTV, and maybe the Gold Sounds video had hit. I'm not sure. But that changed everything, quite honestly. Like totally different totally different makeup of the crowd and the vibe, but
Really?
not in a bad way. It's just like more people got aware
Yeah,
of this
yeah,
really
yeah.
great band, right? And so
Yeah.
that second time they came through, they did 2 shows. They always played St. Andrews Hall, and we call it St. Andy's in Detroit, which I think might be like a 1,500 capacity. It's kind of an interesting place because they have 3 floors, and they can hold shows on any of the 3 floors. The main floor you walk into is where there's about 1,500 capacity, and it has a balcony that kind of overlooks the floor that you can stand in, and then a pretty massive main floor. And then downstairs is a shelter, and then upstairs is the Burns room. And the Burns room usually is not a venue, but usually the green room or the backstage area. But so they came back through, and we had already met them, in May. And between May and this time, we had written one of our famous fan letters that we really wish we would have like made a Xerox copy of. But what I remember about the fan letter we wrote is, at the record store, people would drop off zines they made. And there was a zine that was at the record store with an interview with Glenn Danzig, but like really silly questions. And we just crossed out anywhere it said Danzig and wrote in Pavement, and we thought it was fucking hilarious. I wish I had a copy of it, but we don't. but we Jess was really good with writing fan letters too. So we sent that off in hopes that, they wouldn't forget us between May and October. And so once again, we were waiting outside St. Andrews in the middle of the afternoon for them to come to sound check. And as they drove up, I think it was Scott who rolled down the window, was like, "We got your letter. Where's Ypsilanti?" And it's called Ypsilanti, but where is Ypsilanti? Because I must have put my return address where I was at college. So we're like, "They got the letter. They remember us. This is so great." And the one thing I remember about that, besides them like yelling that they got our letter and were excited to see us again, was there was a solar eclipse happening at the time. And whether or not this aspect is true, it's true in my mind. Like Westy was like an Eagle Scout, or, he's definitely outdoorsy and has many skills that are outdoorsy. So like, he knew to like make a pin box look through thing and trying to figure out what he could make that out of, while the rest of us just stacked up all of our sunglasses. We thought if we stacked enough sunglasses on, we could like, the sun. But we're all standing there, like, taking turns with sunglasses. Like, we're like, "Do you see anything? Do you see anything?" But we're just like, this is just like heavenly and divine. Like, they put on a solar eclipse for us too. And so there was 2 shows. It was early and a late, all ages, and then 18 and over. And that was the beautiful part about St. Andrews, is they had 18 and over, not 21 and over. But and I remember there's 2 openers, and for sure Povo was one of them. But I don't remember the other one for sure. I have a picture of it when we went the next night to Cincinnati. It was the Wolverton brothers, but I don't think that was who was in Detroit. And I was pretty excited about that. Like I had the Vibracoba single when it came out, and then the Crow Crane or Core Crane Secret, and so like to see Povo in '94 was pretty exciting too. But and I remember the thing about Povo is like, we went backstage between shows, and between shows we walked around what was called Greek Town at the time. They've now enclosed it as a casino and everything else like that. But we just kind of walked around and then came back for the second show. And after the second show, we had what was our famous photo shoots where we actually thought to take pictures because we didn't take pictures the first time. And those tended to be like, this was early days of internet too, like in 1994.
Right.
And where I had access to a computer was in the basement at my college. And like we didn't even have computers with like Netscape on them. Well, there were some, but those were for the like computer science kids, and they hogged them all day. So we just
Yes.
had like dummy terminals where we had to be like CT, STMP and stuff like that. And there was this BBS out of
I remember BBS.
Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I don't remember what the room number is. I think it was in the 900s, but it was kind of the alternative room. And that was where people with internet access were discussing Pavement. And that's where I'm pretty sure launched what was considered the first Pavement mailing list. And that's how we communicated, because we all had emails, at least like through college and stuff. And so through Stanford, it was like Pavement at Stanford mailing list, whatever. And you could either get every single email people sent or a digest. But what we called each other were listers because we were on those lists. And when that guy, and I don't know who that guy was, graduated from Stanford and it was going to get closed down, some other guy in Australia opened it up, and everybody moved over there. And that was around the time of maybe Bright in the Corners.
Okay.
But that's how we all kind of communicated in the earliest days. And there was a kid in Washington whose email was Mookie Blaylock, but I don't think it was like Eddie Vedder or anything. I don't know. I do know like he wanted I didn't have a way to scan pictures, but I had these pictures, and he wanted pictures for his fan page for Pavement, because back then when we did finally, like I came back from Christmas break and we finally had Netscape, and you could ask Jeeves or you could search Yahoo, and
yes.
And if you did that there and you put in Pavement, there was some very cutting edge concrete company that had a website.
Of course.
But like who's looking for this on the web, right? But this kid out of Washington State was creating a web page, so we sent him the pictures we had taken in the October Detroit backstage thing, and he put him up on the web on his web page, and so what I had been told after that was like some people, like girls and boys, like, I had that printed out and put it on my wall because it's the first you saw, they really saw their pictures, and interacting with fans, right? So those were famous photos, and this is the one I have it in a frame that most people printed out at the time. It's kind of. Can you see
so
it there?
Cool. Yeah.
These were spark guns. They shot like they just went and had sparks in them from Big Fun in Cleveland, Ohio. And we thought we were doing a Charlie's Angel pose, but we didn't quite get it right. But that's
all right. That's close.
That's 19, or maybe I'm 21 at this point, and she's 20, and that's a very young Malkmus with a Scott going, "What's all that fucking noise back there?" And that was.
I will try and remember to put that photo in the show notes so that people can see what you just described.
Yeah, but that was like one of the first pictures of Pavement on the internet that people saw. And but they asked us like, "Where's your shirts?" They really liked the shirts that we had made them, that Jess will tell you about, or has told you about. And so we thought, and they asked us what other shows we were doing. And I'm pretty sure that's the I think it was after this one. So we decided to go home and get our shirts and then head to Cincinnati for the next night. And so that was the first time besides Chicago, which we'd gone to a lot of shows for before, like that was I've only been to Cincinnati one other time, and that was also for Pavement. But so this was my first time to Cincinnati, and it was the first time we were going to stay in a hotel. And it was just all very, very exciting. We took a lot of like just stupid pictures of
pictures
like
were so precious in the 90s, right? Like, we just didn't have cameras the same way.
Well, and like, the thing is like, you don't know until you go and spend money to develop them if they even came out. So
That's right.
you have a lot of fucking duds, and you're like,
Yeah.
damn it, I didn't even catch that. And we mostly just use those disposable ones, like
That's
the
right.
little
That's what I
ones,
did too.
Yeah.
That's why I have 12 pictures from the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many bad pictures.
Right.
But with so we go to that show, and they told us they'd put us on the guest list. And this was our first, like, not having just to show up and meet them and walk them in and watch sound check. They were going to put us on a guest list. And we get there
Oh.
and we give them.
What year is this? Sorry.
This is still 94. This is
because this is in Cincinnati.
94.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. This is October 94, the second leg of
Post video.
Yeah, post video of this is the second leg of Crooked Rain. And in the second leg is when they started like playing songs from what would be the upcoming album, Wowie Zowie. So in the second leg, they started playing what we called the sedan song, because the one lyric that we could make out that we thought was way out of place in Grounded was about a sedan. And we really like Grounded, but we're like, play the sedan song. And Scott got to do Why Didn't I Ask? We'd scream, Why Didn't I Ask? And that became Kennel District. And we would be like, play it, whatever song, play it, and that became AT&T. So there's a lot of songs on that leg they started playing that would end up on a later record. And it was a fun time. And we get to the club, and we're so excited to be on the guest list, and we give them our ID, and they're like, you're not here. There's no Jen Jones on this guest list.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, what? And and just right then, like, we're just like devastated. And like, what are we gonna do? It's sold out. And right then Bob walks by and goes, hey, it's Jen and Jess Detroit. And they're like, oh, that's what this is, Jen and Jess Detroit. They didn't know our names, and they wrote us down as Jen and Jess Detroit on their friends list. And we're like, yeah, we're Jen. I'm like, I can never claim Jen Detroit. There's so many more cool Jens in Detroit than me, but that's who we are. So if it wasn't for Bob walking by, that night might never have happened.
What a fateful moment.
I know. It was like, oh, geez. And so we were like, hey, do you want to know our real names? And that's when they kind of gave us the pro tip. Like, listen, our booking agent is Botch Billions. This is his email. If ever you need a show or whatever, he's always at a computer, and he'll always get us the message, but we'll never remember it. And they still call me Jen Echo to this day. Because that was my email, jen_echo@yahoo.com. That was my first email. And so that was also like our turning point. And so I started emailing Botch anytime if I knew where I was going to be. Back then tickets were super cheap. I think I shared with you the flyer for my first show, and it was like $5 in advance and $8 at the door in 1992.
Jeez, can you imagine?
And I feel like all of them were pretty affordable, but I was making like $5 an hour and living on my own and in college. So I needed the help at the time. I buy my tickets now, but but back then I needed help. And that night it was just such a fun show. When we left, we needed to go get gas, and they also needed gas, and we ran them. It was the first time we saw them in the wild, like, oh my God, they're real people. Like they also have to fuel their vehicles. And it was just really exciting to like be like, oh yeah, we gotta fuel ours too. Like it just felt like, wow, like, I mean, we were really young and super starstruck. But from there, after 94, they signed up for Lollapalooza in 1995.
Right.
And so they didn't do a lot of touring pre Lollapalooza. And I went to the first Lollapalooza in, like, was that 91? And I swear I was never going to go again. Like, I just fucking hated that kind of scene. It was just, it felt like something out of Lord of the Flies there in Detroit. And when they first started throwing food, and when there was no food, they started throwing grass. And when they didn't have any more sod to throw, they started throwing, so I was like, I never want to see this again. But then
No.
Pavement was playing it on 1995. So I was like, well, fuck, I got to go because I'm not going to miss Pavement if they come through Detroit. So, but the one other show we caught in the Midwest at that time, they came to the Agora Ballroom with Magic Dirt in '95, and Scott had said he wanted us to make him a shirt like ours, and so we did. Jess did, and she's just really, really creative and talented. And at that show, they had a new tour manager. His name was Nigel, and he had a stack like probably of like this tall of like 4x4 paintings, and this was all the artwork that Stephen King had submitted for Wowie Zowie, and it was all the work. It's all the artwork they didn't take. So
Wow.
Nigel was like, you can each pick one, and I had this one, and I liked it because it was the only one that's painted on on an angle, like so it was like a diamond instead of a square, and it was like sailboats. And I don't know where it is, but I feel like it, and I don't know if I still have it, but
You must.
I didn't get rid of it on purpose, but I have a lot of other Stephen Kings at this point, but that one was really, really special, and Nigel was a really nice guy, and I feel like that's when we met Remco, who's been their sound guy at least since then, if not before.
Right.
But that's, I think, when we really met Remco. And it was a fun time, and they still were having fun when they were playing. And I would say then the next we got to see them, they weren't coming through Detroit in '96. But I had a friend living in Boulder, Colorado. He went there for college, and and I always said I'd go visit him. So they were in February of '96. They were playing in Denver, and we thought we can't just do one show, and that would have been our 9th show. Our first shows were different. She did hers in Athens, as you heard, and mine was in Detroit. But 2 through 10 were together, and
Wow.
so we were like, well, we got to catch another one. And the closest one was Albuquerque, 8 hours away. So we rented a car in Denver
Shit.
and then drove to Albuquerque in a day. And I think she told you about our Albuquerque adventure. I did all the driving. And, the one part I'll tell you is just about getting there. Because, again, I use the term, we were super poor, but we were super rich in experiences.
Right.
And like we were the right age at the right time with the right connections and just the right get up and go, right? So my car back home was an '86 Subaru, and I think the speedometer went up to 80. And if you got over 60, it was shaking real bad and losing parts. So in my mind's eye, if it's not shaking, I'm not going more than 60 miles an hour. But this was a brand new Subaru we rented, but it didn't have cruise control. And
Oh,
the first
shit.
time I looked down at the speedometer, I was going like over 90 miles an hour because there is nothing out there on whatever road that is. Like, it's just prairie on either side of you, and it's just grass. And so you can't really tell how fast you're going by
No.
things going by. And I was like, oh, you got to help me watch the speedometer because there's no other cars. There's nothing. I can't, help me watch this. And so we're driving along, and all of a sudden I see this billboard, and it says point of interest, Trinidad, Colorado. And I think, what could be a point of interest out here? Well, it's the fucking cop behind the billboard clocking everybody going by that. And so, like,
Oh,
I see
no.
his lights, and when I see his lights, I look down and I'm doing 98 miles an hour. I'm like, fuck, you were supposed to help me. You're supposed to watch this. And so I pull over, and I'm like, oh, I'm in trouble. And Jess is like, cry. And I'm like, I don't think I have it in me. I can't just cry, like. And so the cop comes up, and he's like, do you know how fast you were going? I was like, 98 miles an hour. And you could just tell he was just like, fuck, why did you say that? Like, you just say no. How fast was I going, officer?
Right.
And he was like, why were you going so fast? And I told him about my Subaru and how if it's not shaking. And he's like, do you know that's a felony? Like, you could do jail time. That's like, you're not allowed to go more than 15 miles over the speed limit. And I was like, what's the speed limit? I didn't even know if it was 55 or what it was. It probably
Oh my
55 back
God.
then. And so
You were
I was like, he's like,
speeding.
you're gonna have to come back and you're gonna have to go to court. And I'm like, I don't even live here. Like, and if they take away my license, like, can they do that in Michigan if this is Colorado? And he's like, well, here's the DA's number. It's gonna get referred to the DA, so you need to call them and tell them. And so like I'm driving the rest of the way because just wasn't feeling good. And so I'm driving the rest of the way going like trying so hard not to go any faster. And I was pretty tense by the time we pulled up there. Again, before as they were loading for sound check, so we got to do sound check, and I'm hoping I get to. I've heard already what she told you about our time there because it was a really fun tense show. I will say that they asked at least they asked me what dedication I wanted. And I really wanted Angel Carver Blues Mellow Jazz Docent because I really wanted to hear Malkmus say, ask me if I want to be fucked, which he did not do. Like they played it for me, but he didn't say it. And I was glad on this, at least in Iceland, Bob said that part. When they were playing it now, but there in Albuquerque, I got my dedication. I got the song I wanted to hear, but I didn't get the part I wanted to hear. So after Albuquerque, Jess and I party ways, and I ended up moving to Boulder that April, or no, that June of '96, and that kind of created a dry spell for me. Like in '97, Pavement toured the hell out of Bright in the Corners, but they only played 2 shows within 8 hours of Denver. And that was in
Really?
Denver and in Omaha. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
Denver is landlocked, man. Like it is really far from everything. Like to
I
drive
know.
out of Denver to get to the next thing is like 8 hours. So that's either going south to Albuquerque or east to Omaha.
Right.
And so I was really excited when they were coming to the Ogden. The Apples in Stereo opened up for them in '97. But
Cool.
when I got there, Remco was smoking outside, and he's like, "Man, they're steer clear. They're in a bad way. We forgot that this was not on the same time zone as Utah. We were late. Like everybody's in a bad mood." I don't remember if that was the time that their amps cracked. I think that might have been earlier in '96, but maybe this was even '98. Maybe this was '98, '96 or '97 or '98. But it was Ogden and then Omaha, so I'd have to go look at some kind of website about their shows because I don't remember if this was '97 or '98. But Apples and Stereo opened up, and Apples and Stereo and Elephant Six was the one reason I thought I could live in Denver. That Elephant Six and Neutral Hotel were recording stuff there.
Really? Didn't know that.
Because yeah, it was, well, my friend lived there too, but yeah, that was where Elephant Six was like located in that time. And I just thought, it was like the new Seattle, like all the best music was coming out of Denver. And I'd seen the Apples in Stereo on Halloween of '95. There was a secret Flaming Lips show at St. Andrews, and I went to see that. But my friend Joe, who got me tickets, said you have to get there early because I got to sneak you in. And I was like, oh, I
Wow.
got to sit through an opener I don't know. And and I got there and the Apples blew me the fuck away. Like, oh
Yeah.
man, they played the shit out of Fun Trick Noisemaker. And I was like, how the flip have I never heard of this band? And I went back to my record store that next day. At that point we had an annex called the Annex, and it was just all the indie rock. And my pop guru, his name is Tim Sendra, he was there, and I was like, have you ever heard of the Apples in Stereo? And he was like, oh man, did they open last night? I heard something, but I wasn't sure. Oh, he couldn't believe he missed it. And so then he started telling me all about the Elephant Six, and at that point, even On Avery Island wasn't out yet, but there's some Neutral Milk Hotel singles, and there's some Olivia Trimmer Control. And he said, but Neutral Milk Hotel was the one to watch. And very soon thereafter, that one had come out. And just loved them. And so when I needed to get out of Ann Arbor, that seemed like a good place to go. So anyway, at this show, the Apples open up, and they're not that good. Or no. They're still good as a opener. That's what it was. They played really good. But like when I'd see them as headliners, when they'd headline their own shows at like smaller clubs around Denver, they were just not as good. And so I thought, oh, maybe they just really bring their A game when they're playing with their idols or something, because at that point I really didn't care if I saw the Apples in stereo because I had seen them a lot of times around Denver and they weren't that good, but they really brought it to open for Pavement that time. And while they were there, Scott came out and brought me, came out and said, "Oh, come watch with me on the side of the stage." And we did, and we talked and everything. And then Pavement played, but there was a lot of fighting and stuff. And after he's like, come find me after the show. And I did. And I was like, where are the other guys? And he's like, oh, they're upstairs. And I said, well, let's go up there and say hi. And he's like, oh, I'll just go wait out on the bus. So I went up and talked with just Mark and Stephen were there. And at that time, there had been a military fighter jet that just went off the radar and nobody could find them. And we were all talking about what what could have happened. And back before libertarians took over Atlas Shrugged, it was like, oh, you just found like John Galt and he's living up there with Dagny and everybody else. But and just all you need is a Leatherman tool because it's got everything on it. But that was fun. And then, when it was time to leave, I went back out because I wanted to go by the bus and say goodbye to Scott. And there was like some of the Apples guys like nervous to knock on the door. And I wasn't nervous. I just knocked on it and was like, okay, I'll see you later. And the next day, I think it was the next day. I don't know if it was a couple days later, but my roommate who came with me to that show, she drove me to Omaha. And that show was bonkers as well. I wanted to say how I came to have advanced copies of two different colors of Dancing with Elders, which became We Dance.
Wow.
But because this guy was from Detroit who made these, and met him at this free London Suede meet and greet dinner. And he had an advanced copy of Wowie Zowie on tape and without any kind of, they all had alternative names and it wasn't like in order and sequenced or anything. And Malkmus said he would give him a song for his label. And so it was called Dancing with Elders at the time, but it became We Dance. And Joe was really hoping it wouldn't be on the record, but it wasn't a single. But that's the
very cool
of those singles. That was pre Wowie Zowie, and Joe factors into a later show. But that was a fun. I mean, he was just in Detroit and he worked in a off the record at Royal Oak at the time, but he had that little label. But so anyway, we're on our way to Omaha now in '97 or '98. And we're having troubles on the road. Like my friend has this like 91 Jetta and it just keeps dying on us. And we're like, oh, we can't stop the car. We got to just keep moving because it won't just die when we're moving. And so we get to Omaha and we scope out the Fun Center, I think is what it was called. And the Fun Center was like must have been like the thing in town where it was a bowling alley and a volleyball pits and it had a bar, and I don't even know what else it had, but it was all in one place. But while we were there and checking it out, our car died in the parking lot. And so we're like, well, I guess we'll just walk over to this restaurant and have lunch. And we did. And when we walked in, like the bowling alley was packed. It was crazy packed. And we're like, wow, like this is bowling's a big thing here in Omaha on whatever day of the week this is. Like it is like completely full. And then we go eat and we don't go for very long. And we're right across, like we're looking at the parking lot and we don't see people come and go. And we go back, after lunch, we go back in there because we have nothing else to do. We're going to have to get jumped to get back to our hotel or something. Like, this is before cell phones, before like Ubers, you're just kind of fucked. I guess you could call a taxi. We could call a taxi, but we were where we needed to be for the night until we needed to be asleep, essentially. So we just
Right.
figured somebody would jump our car after the show. So we go back to the fun center, but now the bowling alley is packed, but it's completely different people, like completely different people. And we're like, how is there like a mass exodus of a full bowling alley? And then like, is there another door? Like, what is it? And so that just felt like we were in the twilight zone. And we go sit in the bar and we're getting a drink and we're asking them about the venue because we're not even sure like where in this building a concert place would be. And the guy's like, "Oh, it's a really great room. It's got a balcony." And I'm like looking around and I'm like, "Is there a second floor here? Like, how would it have a balcony, you know?" And he's like, "Oh, maybe it's more like a loft." And I was like, "Oh, okay." When it's got good sound. And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And so we see that like people are starting to line up to get into the venue, and it's not that big. So if you want to get up to the front or whatever, or a good spot, you got to get in line. So the line was like out by the volleyball pits, and we're like, stand in line. We get up there, and there's this small person on a stool, and they ask for my ID or I don't exactly remember what happened, but they wanted something, and I asked like, "What do you do you need my ID for drinking?" And this little person is like, "Can't you read?" And I'm like looking around for what am I supposed to read, but like at my hip level was a sign saying if you wanted to have a wristband for drinking, you needed your ID out. And that was not my eye level, but that was probably eye level for this little person who put it up. But yeah, I didn't see that sign, but I was like, God, I'm in the
No.
twilight zone. And so then I go in and there is not a loft and there is not a balcony. It's like a sunken living room. Like there's a step up from the sunken part, but otherwise that's the whole of that whole loft
Wow.
balcony thing, right? And I'm like, I better, take my pee break now because you don't want to leave your spot during the show. And I go into what says the ladies' room, but there's urinals. And now there's this bar in Boulder called the Dark Horse. And the Dark Horse has this tricky bathroom where it says women, but it's on a hand pointing at the door next to it. And then the men's is on a hand, it says men's, but it's on a hand pointing at this door. So the one that says women's is the men's, and the one that says men's is the women's.
What the
And,
fuck?
the first time I was at that bar, because they had air hockey tournaments, and this was like 96 when I first moved to Boulder. I go into what says women's, and at that time I was like, "What? Oh, it's filthy in here, and why is there a trough on the floor? And there was only 2 stalls." I'm like, "What the fuck?" And so I go pee. This is, not a pavement related story, but this is why this confused me in Omaha a couple of years later. I'm sitting in the stall and I'm peeing, and then I hear some dudes come in, and they're talking about how like the last time, they and I'm like, "Oh fuck." That trough is instead of urinals is where, they just pee in the trough on the floor. And I'm like, "Oh shit." But, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, there were no dudes in here when I got here. So if I just stay in here long enough, it'll get clear
It'll be
and I
dude
can walk
free
out.
again.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there and for what feels like forever, and just dude after dude comes in, and one dude comes in and he's like, "Oh, whew, last time I was in here, there was a chick in here." And I was like, "That's my cue." So I like bust out of the stall and I'm like, "Yep, there's a chick in here again. Sorry." And I just walked out, right? So here I am in another women's bathroom with urinals, but I'm not going to be tricked this time. So I walk back out and I like see if it's like a trick where it's like pointing to a different door, but it definitely says women right on the door and there's no fingers pointing anywhere. And so this like cocktail waitress, and she's like, I'm in my 20s, so I don't know how old she was. She seemed really old to be a cocktail waitress to me in my 20s, but maybe was like
Right.
30, had a hard life. I have no idea. But she's like, "Can I help you?" And I'm like, "Is this the women's bathroom?" And she says to me, "Can't you read?" And I'm like, that's twice tonight. Like, fuck, you know I can read. Like, I'm just like, why are there urinals in here? Like, I felt like it was a trick again, and I didn't want to be tricked again. So already I'm just like out of sorts. And the show itself was like nothing to speak of. They were fighting and not really happy with each other. But after the show, we all went backstage and we just had to wait till everybody left, and they closed it down, but they left the bowling alley open for Pavement, so Pavement could bowl. And so we got to bowl with Pavement. Now that was that was the time where Scott had recently gotten married. This was to his first wife, Chrissy, who's a doll too. And Westy was already married. Westy married young, and so I had saw in a Denver antique store, I saw this like cocktail set. It was a vintage cocktail set where all of the pieces had golf club handles, or like were shaped like it was a golf themed like 1950s cocktail set. So I got that for Scott for a wedding present, because he was into golf. Because some of the free things from Crooked Rain was some golf tees, which I've since lost, and an ashtray, which I still have. It's on my table here. I can show it to you. But he was the big golfer in the group. So I got him this, and at the same place I found this book. It was like from Boys Life magazine, but also from the 1950s, and it was like illustrated of like things, how to have a good boyhood. And so, it talked about wrestling with your friends, and like showed all these like illustrations from the 1950s on how to wrestle with your friends, and a good summer job would be a caddy. And it was just like so dated and so funny. So I had bought that for Malkmus, and because I thought he would appreciate it, but he was not receiving gifts at the time. So Westy said, inscribe it and I'll give it to him. And I don't know whatever happened with that, but the bowling was a blast. But we knew, now that everybody was gone, that the only people left to jump us was going to be Pavement, because again, our car is dead in the parking lot.
Oh my
And
God.
so we're like wrapping up, and we're like, could you guys give us a jump? And they were like, we think so. Like, do you have cables? And we're like, we think so. And so they had like a rental van. And, again, Westy, my Eagle Scout, like he knows there's a right and a wrong way to jump a car, but none of us are exactly sure what the right and wrong way is. Like,
Oh, it's one of my biggest fears as well. I have an irrational fear of it.
Yeah, like and when they popped the hood on their van, it didn't have the same kind of battery. So I was like, where do you even fucking connect this? Like it was pretty touch and go there for a while, but we decided we were going to leave both cars off, hook up all of them, all the cables, and then try to turn them on. And it worked, and nobody died. And that's how Pavement jumped my car in Omaha after a very bizarre night and adventure. And we got a new battery, and it kept dying on the way home. And it turned out that her trunk light was never going off, and so it was killing the batteries.
Oh fuck.
So yeah, that was crazy. But those are the only shows I caught on Brighten the Corners. Those two shows, Denver with the Apples in Stereo, and this show here, and in Omaha, because it's hard to get. I was poor, and it was hard to get out of. So at that time, like me having over 30 shows, but not quite 40. There's people who have way, way more shows than me, because during Brighten the Corners, they toured a ton, but I was living in a place in a time with no money to be able to get anywhere to see shows. So I didn't get to see any. I got to see 2 at that time, where most people got to see like 10 in a week and stuff. So after in 98, I moved to Chicago. Or 99, sorry, it was like January 1, 99. And there, they played a few times, and again, they probably like did maybe 2 tours, because they played in Chicago, and I knew that like in Chicago, I figured again there would be a lot of like celebrities backstage and stuff like that, so I wasn't gonna like try to go backstage and hobnob, or maybe I even did and I just didn't stay long. I don't remember, but I knew I was going to Detroit. I was taking the train from Chicago, and I was going to be back in Detroit. But this time, I was going to meet up with a pave lister named Rob, He had been on the Pavement list since like Crooked Rain or whatever, and he was coming down from Pittsburgh. And so it was like the first time I was willing to like meet somebody that, I didn't know,
Yeah.
just because we were talking about Pavement on the internet. And so Rob picked me up at the train station. And, the first thing he told me is that he had a serious girlfriend. And I'm all like, I'm not trying to get on you. And the thing was, my friend Joe, who made that Dancing with Elders single.
Yeah.
He just bought a house in Detroit. He was a big Detroit. He was born and raised there, and he was just super pro Detroit, and he really wanted to rebuild Detroit. And so he bought this house, and so he's like, yeah, you can totally crash with me. So I was like, yeah, we're gonna. I got a place to stay, and he's like, okay, well, let's go there first. And we go over to Joe's house, and it's in a rough neighborhood, like. He's got a corner lot, but that's but that's because everything else is like demolished or burnt out,
Oh,
And he opens his
shit.
door and like every floor surface, stairs, every room is just linoleum. But what Rob notices is that there is a bajillion dishes like in the sink, on the counters, flowing out, and we're like, "What's going on there?" And he's like, "Oh, we're just having this standoff. Like we're out of dish soap, and nobody wants to buy it because I think he had roommates or something." And so, so, so we go. We're like, we're gonna try to find something to eat, and Rob's like, "Let's get him some dish soap." But they he takes us up to our room and he opens the door and it's just this stained mattress on the floor. That's all we've got. and I could just
Oh my
see Rob
God.
going, shit, like, how am I going to explain this to my girlfriend? I'm like, for the last time, I am not trying to get on you. like, don't worry, we can sleep head to feet. Like, if that's going to make you feel better, or, you can sleep on the floor, or, maybe I don't want to sleep on a stained mattress. I don't know. We'll just see how I feel after the show and how tired I am. But like, I'm just like, oh, geez, Joe, like, you didn't have any, like, he was not, like it didn't even occur to Joe that he should make it nice for guests. Like it was just like, you need a place to crash, this is what you get. And so we get to the show, and I don't know if Rob had met Pavement before that, but pretty much if you hung out with me, you were going to get to meet Pavement, and at least back then. And we get to the show, and it was a blast, and he had a blast, and we went backstage afterwards, and he was just starstruck that he got to have such good one-on-one time with him. And so he said, I'm driving to Toronto next and meeting up with another Pave lister named Randall. It's Randall Spencer Mindel. And I'm sure Randall wouldn't mind if you stayed there, and I'm pretty sure we'll have something better than a mattress on the floor that's stained. And I was like, yeah, I'm down. If I can get on a train, back in Pittsburgh to Chicago, and we figured it out. And so, that next day we're going to head out to Toronto together after just meeting hours earlier. He had lost all worry that I was going to jump him, I guess. And we go to eat just around the corner. So it was me and Joe and Joe's girlfriend at the time, who I don't remember her name, and Rob, and I had to use the restroom. So I go into the restroom, and when I come out, like, they're like under the table, and like it's like chaos and people are screaming, and I'm all like, what happened? But right next to St. Andrews was this club called Legends, and Legends let out, and that crowd liked to just shoot guns in the air, I guess, as they walk back to the car.
Fuck.
So Rob liked to say that he was involved with a walk-by shooting. Like, if they didn't shoot into the restaurant, it's just guns were going off nearby. So that was a pretty exciting Detroit experience. I think that was his first and maybe only Detroit experience, which I had never been there when Legends let out and guns went off.
Oh.
But it seemed like it was pretty exciting. So the
How
next
was your
night
trip to Toronto?
it was nice. Well, I'd never been, and back then you didn't need passports or anything.
No, just driver's license. Yeah,
you just crossed the border there in Windsor, and they didn't care. And so we go to Toronto, and what I remember about being there, like, Randall really wanted. I think we called him Spencer. I don't think we called him by his first name. I think we called him Spencer. Really wanted to take Rob to Chinatown to try boba tea. I think that was kind of new to everybody back in 1999, and because Rob had never had it, but I had, sucking gooey balls up through a straw did not sound good to me. But they were super giddy, super excited to drink this stuff. So we walked around Chinatown for a while, and we all went to the show. Well, I think we took separate cars, or maybe Spencer met somebody there, but we all went to the show together. And at that time, they had Deb as their tour manager. And we had met Deb the night before in Detroit, and she was lovely and fun. But in Toronto, she showed up. She was roller skating around whatever this place was. I don't even know the name of the venue. And she was having a ball. And she was like, "Oh yeah, let me get you some passes, and wait till after the show and stuff like that." And what I remember about that show is Bob called out a Bob called out a dedication to me, and then Stephen decided to play "Stop Breathing." Like I was like, "What? Like why?" When we drove back, and this again, like I think, I didn't have my first cell phone, I think, until 2001. So again, no cell phones, no GPS. We had an address, and Rob thought he knew the way back to Spencer's house, and we got back to where we thought was Spencer's house. But we thought Spencer would have left like a light on for us or something, and there was no lights on, and so we were like, "Oh, it's late, and we got to be on the road in like 4 hours, and we don't want to knock on somebody else's door in the morning." So we just slept in Rob's car, and and then
Oh my God.
somehow woke up when daylight broke, and all sore because again it wasn't a very I mean, it wasn't great. But when the daylight came, we were definitely in front of his house. He just didn't leave any lights on. But we had a train to catch, or I had a train to catch, so we had to haul ass from Toronto back to Pittsburgh so I could get on that train. But on the way there, well, I guess I don't know on the way there or what, but there was a second leg in like the fall again where I would catch him in Chicago, but I didn't make a plan with Rob. I made a plan with some other listers. There was a guy named Scott Callaghan who had actually done the official website for Pavement. By then, they had a website called Pavement, the rock band, or something like that.
Right.
And Scott Callaghan was like the web host and helped them like upload stuff like that. And one of the oldest listers who'd been around from the beginning was this guy named Bob Schwalina. And so I made a plan with Scott Callaghan that I would fly out to Baltimore, Townsend, Maryland was where the show was. And we'd catch that show, and then we would take the back roads, with a Silver Jews reference to Raleigh, North Carolina, where we meet up with another lister named Corey Rayborn, who was a massive taper at the time, and he had all the trading tapes things. And we would stay with Corey, but Rob was living in Virginia at the time, and so he met up with me and Scott and Bob at Townsend, and the White Stripes opened there. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet.
And Rob was just super excited to be with us again, that he decided he was going to also just come along with us, at the last minute to Raleigh, which almost made he's now married with a kid to this woman that, but she didn't want him to go because I don't remember exactly what was going on at the time, but he was just like, "I got to, I just, this is once in a lifetime." And he's like, "I might not have a fiance after this," but he came with us, and they played in like this carpet warehouse, like converted carpet warehouse in Raleigh. And what I remember about that show was like we get in there and there's this woman who's just like stretching out, like she's, like just really stretching out and her name was Lindsay, and she was a kind of a newer lister, like maybe from the Brighten the Corner era, like around this time, but she liked to dance like crazy. So she definitely like made sure she was limber before the show, and she's in there just like stretching out, and that was kind of funny.
That's very
that
funny.
night, like Corey didn't want to hang out. He had just started law school, and he didn't like being out late on a school night, and so we didn't hang out with the band or anything like that. That show, but they were coming to Chicago soon enough, and another lister named Katie Linden she went by the name Wonder Llama on the Pavement list. She started the first Bob Nastanovich fan page on the internet, which we all didn't know at the time. She was only 14 when she did it.
Oh my
So
God.
at this time, she's 18 years old, and she's at the University of Michigan. And she writes to me and says, "Hey, I'd like to take the train up to see Pavement, at the Metro. Um, can I crash with you?" And at this time, I was open to those kind of things, and I was like, "Absolutely!" And I was excited because she was so funny, like on the internet. Like, she was just very witty and just very clever. So when I went to the train station to pick her up, I wasn't even sure I had the right person because she was extremely shy. Like, she couldn't make eye
Oh,
contact. She didn't want to, like, she was just like, like so meek. And I was like, it's so crazy how it's a different personality if you're not in person, right? But she
Wonder
was going to meet
Llama.
Bob that night. Like, that was going to happen, right? Like, she was definitely going to meet Bob. And I thought she'd be like super excited about it. And he was definitely super excited to meet her. But she was just like mortified, like, oh God, like, I don't know if I could do this. But it was a fun show. Again, I can't tell you like the highlights of it or anything. It's mostly the backstage stuff.
Yeah.
That Chrissy was there, which again was Scott's first wife. And she like was telling she was just real good about like telling us all the best secrets and things like that, and debunking things that the myths and stuff. But Scott pulled me aside. This was October 15th. I got my backstage pass from that show. It was at the Vic
Very
there
cool.
on
Jen is showing it to me right now.
October 15th, 1999. But at that show, that was my 19th show, and I was telling them that, and Scott said, "Well, if you want to see 20, you got to make it to Cincy tomorrow night because that's the last show in the U.S. and we're breaking up after this tour," which shattered my fucking world, but
Yeah.
also was like, well, fuck yeah, I got to figure out how to get to Cincy tomorrow, like with no notice. So we had to hightail it out of there because there was plans to be made because I was carless still and didn't have a credit card. Katie had a credit card, but she wasn't old enough to rent a car. And I was like, what do we, the train schedule wasn't going to work because it takes too long, and buses weren't going to work. So the only thing I could think was I got to borrow my parents' car. And my parents' car was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we were in Chicago. So that's already 4 hours away.
Oh
And
my
then
God.
Cincinnati is like 5 hours from there. But if we were on the very first train to Ann Arbor and got the car right away and got on the road to Cincinnati, we would make it. So for now, I gotta, at like 2 o'clock in the morning, get a hold of my parents to find out if I can borrow a car. So, they have an answering machine, the old kind with the tape, so
Yeah.
you hear
Yeah.
the messages it's being recorded, and I'm just screaming, "Wake up! It's an emergency!" Because the machine's in a different room than them, so I'm just screaming into the phone over and over as fast as I can dial and hang up. And my mom gets on the phone and she's like, "What? Where are you? Are you okay? What's happening?" And I'm like, "I need to borrow the car." And she was like, "What? Like you? Yeah, I thought you were in trouble." And I'm like, "I am. If I don't get to Cincinnati tomorrow, I'm not going to see 20 Pavement shows. This is an emergency." And she's like, "Well, how are you going to get here?" And I tell her the plan, and she's like, "Yeah, I'll meet you at the train station." So it was on. It was on. So Katie was able to rent or reserve a hotel room for us in Cincinnati for this show with her credit card. So we had a place to stay. She didn't know how to drive, so I had to do all the driving for that too. So it was a really long day to get there, on top of knowing that this was the end. So it was kind of
Right.
emotionally heavy for me.
Yeah, I
And
bet.
yeah, it was good though. And there I met another pave lister I'd never met before. Her name is Carrie Pepperman. She was and Lindsay was there too, the dancer lady, and she brought apples from her tree in her yard. I guess she went to UVA as well, and I don't know if that meant she was there at the same time as Bob and Scott and David DC Berman or whatever, and Westy, but she was there too, and Chrissy was there, Scott's wife, and so I took everybody back to meet him because I knew this. I wasn't telling everybody at the time. Like Katie had heard it because she was with me, but I wasn't telling all these other people what I'd heard. And I immediately emailed Botch and was like, "Is it true?" And he's like, "It depends on if your cup half full or cup half empty. I mean, it's true for now. Who knows how long it'll be." But I'm like, "Oh God!" And at that point, there was a disk server Pavement web board, just called, I don't know, Paveboard or something like that. And that's where a lot of the like Bright in the Corners, Twilight fans were, but also where like the listers had started like posting. I don't know. That's, I think, where I met Carrie. Was maybe she was on the web board and not on the Pavement list. But I remember I, stupidly was like, oh, like it's the end of the rock and roll era. That was the last Pavement.
Man.
And like nobody fucking believed me. There was this kid, I won't name names because he did some other internet stuff that made him a little bit more famous, but he was a kid at the time. And he like said, "Listen, star fucker, just from your moderately attractive cloud, maybe," like, I don't know. He was just like, he did not believe me. And I'm like, "Listen, you don't have to believe me, but I've never fucked any of them." And and like it was just really like, I mean, it was just crazy how people were just like, "You're wrong." And I'm like, okay, I'll just suffer alone in this knowledge that this was the last we were going to see them in the US. And it was until 2010. Uh, and so that was pretty funny. But that's when I was living in Chicago at that point, since January. But I did meet Botch backstage the night before Cincinnati. That was probably when I met him in person after emailing him for years. And that's where we became friends in person. So he would, I still didn't have a car, so he would drive me to concerts and things like that. But that was a interesting era. So it was pretty sad for a while.
Yeah,
like it was still like, it took a while after the Brixton show where he had handcuffs and said being in a band is like whatever. Like then people started to kind of believe it, but that was months later.
How did you hear about that moment? Through the boards?
I mean, because we had the web board, so people were
people were talking about it.
Who were there.
People who were at the Brixton show. Right.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. So, then they then people started to believe it, but they thought, oh, it's just, Malkmus just needs to cool off, because he's definitely the one that was not happy anymore. And so this is probably my last story here. So flash forward to 2003, and the Jicks are touring, and they're Botch. I'm at the Jicks show in Chicago, and Botch goes, "Hey, they've been practicing some Pavement songs, and if you want to hear a couple Pavement songs, you need to get to Milwaukee tomorrow night." And I'm all like, "How many?" And he's like, "A couple. They'll probably play them in the encore." And I'm all like, "How big of a fucking junkie am I that I'm going to drive to Milwaukee to see maybe a couple Pavement songs?" But I know enough that I got to trust Botch's tips.
Yeah.
So we drive to, I mean, it's maybe 2 hours away, but it was like in a like a student rec hall type place on campus. And it was really small, and like there was no alcohol. They were just selling pops out of coolers. And like, it was just like I just felt like I just kept being like, I am such a fucking junkie. Like I just need a fix. Like this is so dumb. This is so dumb. For maybe a couple songs in an encore. Now, this has also caused internet fights. Malkmus comes out by himself, okay, and he plays "She Believes."
Really?
And everybody's just stunned, and I'm all like,
"Yeah,
was that it? Was that the one song?" And he goes off stage, and they come out, and I don't remember what the next song was, but by Summer Babe, I'm like, holy fuck, this is going to be a whole Pavement set. And nobody's going to believe it. Just like they didn't believe me when Pavement broke up. And at work, they had just issued me this thing called a Sony Clie, which was like Sony's answers to the Palm Pilot, but it had a voice recorder on it. And I was like, I have got to record this because nobody is going to fucking believe this happened. So I have my Sony Clie, and but it's mostly a voice recorder. So it's not going to make a very good music recording thing. But I see at the soundboard, there's like things plugged into it. So there's got to be another recording. But to this day, no other recording has ever been issued.
Really?
So I'm holding it for a while, and the Jicks play an entire Pavement show in chronological order. So, as they're going down the catalog, and I hear somebody call out for something that's on another record, I'm like, they've already passed that record. And I like the loudest thing on this tape I made, or this recording I made, is my fucking snarky comments. But at some point I hand it to my boyfriend because, I've got dancing to do. And he puts it in his pocket. So then it gets even more muffled. It's a terrible recording. But it's the only proof that this happened. And I don't even know where the original is anymore. Somebody sent me a scrubbed version where they could kind of tone down my vocals of me being all snarky about people calling stuff out. But it's the only one. I mean, I don't know if he's holding it for some time to release it or whatever, but he became lore, because again, This is Milwaukee, like a early show. And like, why the fuck did they do that there? I don't know. Maybe because it was low stakes, like nobody important was going to be there and it wasn't going to be, but it was the only time they did that. Now, flash forward to 2010. And Pavement's coming back to Milwaukee, and the Milwaukee music scene is just like, they're finally gracing us again, but we did have that one show that was so special, and here's the set list, and the set list is not right. I mean, I have a recording. It shows you exactly what what got played, at least from this half of the starting in the third, the second song that the whole band played, halfway through that all the way through the end. So the set list is not in the right order, and it's not even the songs necessarily they played, because there's a recording of that. And I say, actually, he came out and he played She Believes first by himself. And they're like, no, he didn't. Look, here's the set list. And I'm like, were you there? Because it happened. And people were just like, nah, wanting to fight with me on the internet. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. My boyfriend was there. He remembers it. So in Iceland, I went to Iceland, and I was talking to Malkmus on that last night. And I was like, do you remember that show? And he's like, oh, yeah. And I said, did you come out and play She Believes first and then go back and then the rest of the band? And he's like, I believe that's exactly what happened. But, and I was like, are you right? It did. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, people wanted to fucking fight me about that. Like, I didn't make this shit up. Why would I make this up? But that part I didn't record because I wasn't ready for it. But he validated me later, So
yes. And he did it playfully as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, he was in such good spirits. That was like this 2022. They're older, they're wiser. They're letting bygones be bygones. They're really, it's been a lot of fun. So
I wish I had ample resources so I could go to South America.
Oh, I know. I was telling my husband, like, please, let's just do that this year. And he was like, I don't want to be in South America.
Yeah.
So he's got to hope that they'll like do another one for Wowie Zowie's, 30 year thing or whatever. Who knows? But because I asked Botch after New Zealand, how long do I have to live to see Pavement in U.S. soil again? And he's like, you got to live 5 years.
Oh,
and I'm like, I think I can live 5 years.
That's good. Okay. I want to ask you if you're ready to talk about song number 10.
Sure.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip the record and we're going to come back on the other side and talk about song number 10. And we'll be right back after this.
Hey, this is Bob Nastanovich from Pavement. Thanks for listening. And now on with a countdown.
10. This week on the show, we finally crack into the top 10 on the countdown. And Jen Echo is here to talk to me about number 10, fucking Elevate Me Later. This is a great song to kick it off. Jen, what are your initial thoughts about Elevate Me Later?
Well, I could tell you in 94, I was really waiting for this record to come out. And to me, this song, I thought this could have been the opener on the record. It sounded like it could have been from the Watery domestic like recording session, because it just had a more of that kind of smooth feel to it. And I think they track that record great still, because
I did too, yeah.
Silent Kit comes out kicking your butt, and then this one kind of is like a nice fun tongue in cheek of like, as far as what I think it was about, like when I first heard this was going to be my song, my first thought was, I remember thinking Malkmus had to be like prophetic, and because it came out before the OJ trial. But like this idea that the courthouse was dark for press, although that one was pretty light on TV, and this idea of like famous people living lives now that we see like on TV that like we could only imagine before, but now you see like just how different their lives are. But
right,
like when OJ's on trial for murdering his wife, and just all the stuff around the court proceedings that were on there. I remember thinking, oh my God, like did he see this coming? But and then what I was talking about with Jess is how because we were seeing a lot of shows and stuff. One of my favorite things about this song is that with about like 45 seconds left into it, they let Westy go ape shit, like it's the end, like just go nuts and blah, 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 drum, and then they pause. And like we would love it when the crowd would start going woo. We're like, don't, not yet. There's still an outro to happen, But like this idea that like it was one of their first songs where they started playing with that kind of timing, where it would like kind of pause for a second and you're like, oh, is it over? Oh wait, no, there's still some more. But it was the idea that Westy got to really go bonk, and that was our introduction to Westy, right? Like I don't even know.
Yeah,
I know I didn't know ahead of time that Gary was gone, and so cut your hair and the second drummers drown and stuff. Like this was the first introduction we had to Westy, and so it was that those were the thoughts I had about that song. Like I love the I told you earlier, like that the like Kentucky Cocktail and circa 1762, Watery domestic, and like this song I feel like is in that same kind of I don't know if he wrote them at the same time, but it kind of has a similar feel, and that's the kind I love that stuff. I love that era of Pavement. So this was one of my favorite songs. And what I also remember is that on set lists, at least in the early days, they called this LS2, but they spelled it ES. But if you look like LS2, that's like on like whatever they released when they released the like whatever is totally different lyrics. It's the same music but different lyrics. But that wasn't the case.
Yes.
That's how they referenced Elevate Me Later on all their set lists very early on. So LS2 is what we thought it was called until the record came out, and we were happy it was on there because it's just it's more melodic, and it just feels like more mature than some of their songs. I mean, it just keeps going, right? I mean, Grounded then comes to be their up, where it really all comes together. But Elevate Me Later is just it was just one of many great songs on Crooked Rain.
Yes.
And I was really looking forward to that record, and this is one of my favorite songs on that record for sure. And yeah, I remember reading, because Liz Phair was blowing up at the time, and reading a thing about her, about how she was playing Cricket Rain, and she's going on her runs around Lake Michigan. And I was like, oh, she's just like me.
That's so
I wasn't running around
cool.
Lake Michigan, but just this idea that, like, you know, other ladies liked Pavement, because we were pretty rare as ladies who liked Pavement
Yeah.
in the early days. But you know, some of those songs are good to run to, but I feel like it definitely is a great sophomoric effort. It definitely sounded a lot different than Slanted, and it was definitely a window of what was to come. And I think Elevate Me Later, LS2, really is that showcase of how they've become way more competent in their playing, and just kind of the sound they were going to be going for a little bit.
Yeah.
They didn't stay there for very long, but that's some of my favorite era of Pavement.
Oh, that's nice. Do you think, I mean, after talking about it so poetically and lovely, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts here. Do you think the song is rated properly? Do you think it made the, crack in the top 10 at number 10? Do you think it's rated properly, or is it overrated, underrated, or just right?
Well, gosh, I don't know if it'd be my top 10.
Okay.
It would be my top 20 of their songs. I feel like, there's ones I like better, but I do think it's a great song. So I think I don't know what else is on the countdown and what else it might have been, how it, but I feel like
it's all going to shake down. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how it's all going to shake down, because, when they did that contest for, the Quarantine the Past, and
Right.
they asked, like, everybody to submit their whatever top 25 or however it went. Like, I was so wrong. like it was like nothing like I thought it would come out, So, like, I wasn't even close. So I definitely, because, they say that, like, the music you hear when you're 16, 17 years old really is your heart and soul,
Yeah.
and so mine's definitely earlier Pavement. So I tend to my favorite Pavement song of all time would be Perfume D. And it always
That's a
has
good
been.
choice.
It's always been. Always, forever. That's always been my favorite song. I just love the play on words, and the vivid scenery, that he draws there, of just thought that song was, I've loved that song since I was 18, 19 years old. So that's probably my favorite. And so I tend to like those songs, like that era, better. But this would probably, I think 10's probably fair. 10's probably fair.
Okay. I like it that you went in a little harsh at the top, saying top 20, and then you came back around because they're all your babies.
They are. And like, if as far as what was on the original albums, it's definitely in the top 10 of that. You know what I mean? If we're not talking about Peel Session songs that were on, B-sides and things like that, like of studio records and songs to choose from, that's definitely in the top 10 of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's pretty properly rated.
Yeah. It's a great song. I mean, it's really hard to say, I mean, they've got so many great songs to choose from.
Well, they certainly do. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And wash your goddamn hands. Thanks for listening to Meeting Malkmus, a Pavement podcast, where we count down the top 50 Pavement tracks, as selected by you. If you've got questions or concerns, please shoot me an email. jd.meetingmalkmus@gmail.com. Podcasts and such.